Hello, everyone, and welcome back in for another edition of the Sun Devil Source podcast presented by Jones Auto Centers. Gabby Chernoff and Chris Cartman with you as always. Chris, this is also the last time that everyone's going to be seeing us in this format, in this virtual video format. We're very excited to announce that from now on, every Monday for the rest of ASU's football season, we will be doing a live video podcast from Rack Scottsdale. If you've never heard of it or if you've never seen it, it's an upscale pool lounge place. It's a really cool vibe and just kind of an overall cool place. It's right in the heart of Old Town Scottsdale. And I know we're both very excited about this opportunity to partner with Rack and to get everything going. And I'll let you talk a little bit more about that and what we have in store.
Yeah, super cool. Ed Archuleta is the owner of Rack Scottsdale. Like you said, it's a pool hall, sports bar vibe, right? Lots of TVs. They got darts and other games in addition to pool. And they're trying to bring a lot more ASU traffic and relationships there. I think we're going to be able to have some live events with some big name guests, ASU people that everyone will be interested in seeing and coming out to watch some of these live events that we're going to be able to have at Rack Scottsdale. Super exciting partnership. So yeah, we'll be basically leading in to Monday Night Football with our podcast airing around 4:15 for about an hour on Monday afternoons from Rack all through the season, every week, bye weeks into December. Bowl season. So we're looking forward to being able to bring that to you. And then we'll continue to have a Thursday podcast that we're going to do on video from now on that we'll do similar to this format as well. But really appreciate Jones Auto Centers, Jones Ford, Verde Valley, and Rack Scottsdale for springboarding our ability to be able to do some of these cool things.
Yeah, it's definitely a very exciting new era for Sun Devil Source, and we're really excited to get it started. We did a test stream a couple days back. Everything looks really good, so we're really excited to bring it to you all in that new format. But with that being said, just want to get into kind of some of the newsy things following that NAU game. Most notably, ASU dropped one spot to number 12 in the AP poll. There were some things that fans were maybe concerned about, and just kind of given how the rest of the Big 12 did. They're still the highest ranked Big 12 team, but a couple of them are kind of creeping up. So, Chris, what did you just make of the ranking, the drop, and just that whole thing in general?
Not surprised to see ASU get passed by Illinois. Illinois won big over an FCS opponent, similar to what ASU played. And really, I think my big takeaway was just how strong that the Big 12 looked in the opening weekend. There were, I think, 6 of ASU's future conference opponents that won by at least 33 points. And probably Utah was most impressive. I said in one of our earlier podcasts, I thought Utah was the biggest game on the schedule because that opening 3 of playing at Baylor, playing TCU at home, which also put a lick on North Carolina. People who are North Carolina fans probably a little bit anxious right now, a lot more than ASU fans, I would imagine. But yeah, Utah looked fantastic on both sides of the ball, dominant at the line of scrimmage. That's super common for Utah. And then Dampier is a quarterback who's got tremendous mobility. He had a lot of interceptions at his prior stop, so we're going to have to see when opponents make him a pocket passer how he fares. But yeah, like a bunch of these teams that ASU is going to play had pretty dominant showings in their first game. And so that's something that we're going to be monitoring quite closely over the next couple of weeks of the non-conference.
Devin Dampier, fun fact, also played for the Saguaro team that Jason Mons, ASU's tight end coached. So the more you know. But another notable piece of news, since that NAU game, Kenyon Floyd was named Big 12 Special Teams Player of the Week. He was averaging about 48 8.5 yards per punt, and special teams punting especially was a big area of concern for ASU heading into this season. So, Chris, what do you think of Kenny Floyd kind of just coming out with a bang and then getting rid of any of those concerns?
Yeah, I think you remember, of course, Gabby, and ASU fans will remember that Kenny Dillingham predicted that special teams would be drastically improved. That's a quote. And it wasn't perfect. There were some issues, but in the first punt that he had was a short one. And I think fans were kind of like, oh, what's going to happen here? It was a 30-something yard punt when he had an opportunity to flip the field. But then subsequently, he had a 48-yarder and then a 50-something yarder. And then his last punt wasn't quite as good, but still pretty good. And there weren't returns. So that's a very good sign. His leg strength has always been there. It's more been a factor of getting the drop really consistent so that he can strike it properly. And when he does that, he's able to be very successful and put together a performance that's worthy of this type of an award. There were other candidates this week that were pretty impressive. In fact, Iowa State's kicker made a 63-yard field goal, which was a school record. I have the only vote. There's only one vote per beat covering each team in this Big 12 poll. I have the ASU one. I voted for the guy who had the 63-yard school record, and Kenny Floyd was, maybe like my next guy or two or three. So, but very impressive start for Kenny Floyd. And that's going to be a big deal because ASU's average starting field position last year was not nearly as good as it should have been for a team that went on to win 11 games. You're going to need the ability to flip the field, to pin opponents inside the 20 with fair catches. So I think we're going to need to see when they go to Mississippi State, is he going to be able to have that 4.4 to 4.5 second hang time that prevents any kinds of returns? Is he going to be able to flip the field when ASU's pinned deep and he's punting from in the end zone or near the end zone? Those are the things that are going to really give a clear indication of how reliable that this might be for ASU moving forward. And if it is proven to be reliable, that would be a very big development because it was one of the areas where ASU lacked last season, without a doubt.
Definitely an exciting area for ASU fans to be seeing improvement in, for sure. But we also heard from Kenny Dillingham on Monday. He does his weekly press conference on Mondays. So anything else just kind of newsworthy, injury related? I know we saw a couple of guys go down in that Saturday game against NAU. So do we have any sort of injury update there and just other kind of newsworthy things?
Yeah, so we're recording this on Tuesday. There was not an injury update provided. Monday, Kenny Dillingham said that they were waiting to get some more information on a few guys, including Justin Watley, who got knocked out of the game. Maxi Honatro went out, and then he came back in. Jalen Moss appeared to be bothered by a foot, and he didn't return to the game. So given that there was not an update on Tuesday, we were there at practice. We're able to see what's going on. So we know who participated, who didn't, but we were asked to not provide an 11-on-11 first team, second team offense and defense like we normally do today. So, and that's, I think, partly related to not trying to tip off opponents to who may or may not participate for ASU. The one thing I can say to try to alleviate any concerns that there might be out there is Dillingham said that there weren't any really serious injuries, and that's accurate. There's nobody that's going to seemingly miss like an extended amount of time, but there were one or more guys that were not full participants. It's just that we can't provide details about who exactly did what, and perhaps later in the week we'll be able to say more. Maybe not in this format. You might have to hop into the Devil Sanctuary. If you're not a member, you might want to go ahead and do that. We did, by the way, Gabby, not to humble brag or whatever, but we hit our all-time high for subscribers just this week. In fact, 2 days ago. And also we crossed over 80% on annual memberships, which is the first time we've ever done that. So people are pretty fired up about what's going on right now. And I'm very thankful to everybody who's new on the site. And if you're not on there, it's the best community for ASU fans. We've got thousands of people posting all the time. Hard to keep up, hard to respond to everyone, but I do my best and I answer as many questions as I possibly can.
Well, that's a pretty good problem to have, I would say, on a site like ours. Another thing with that too, our podcast has been doing very well. I was looking at our YouTube analytics the other day. I think in the past month, two podcasts that we have up, they're both in the top 5 of our most viewed videos for the month. So that's awesome. And then I think our last podcast that we put up had close to 500 downloads within the day I posted it. So thank you to everybody for listening to our podcast, whether you're consuming it through YouTube or Spotify or Apple Podcasts. We really have a fun time doing these for you. It's just kind of a fun way.
Yeah. And as I was saying, and sorry to cut you off, but when we are going to have like some bigger guests and some of these live podcasts are going to be more like event format. So I think people are going to, like, if we're already kind of doing well relative to all of our video coverage, it's going to go to another place once we start to have some of those things. And that's pretty exciting. And it's also an opportunity to bring people together. Like, I think we're going to have some meetup things at Rack Scottsdale where people can all hang out. I really enjoyed when we were at the Peach Bowl and there was a New Year's Eve party that we had at Gibney's, which was right around the corner from the ASU team hotel in downtown Atlanta. There was a few hundred members of the sanctuary that were in there. And so being able to do that a little bit more often to bring people together is a big part of what we're trying to do, and super excited.
Yeah, very exciting. I can't say too much, but you're definitely going to want to stay tuned to see what we have planned. But with that, I want to welcome in back-to-back podcasts for you. Welcome in our writer, Jake Sloan. Jake, thank you for joining us. Jake's been doing all the big research for this Mississippi State game this weekend. And, of course, you were reporting on the NAU game this past weekend. So, Jake, welcome back into the podcast.
Thank you for having me. Glad to be back. Glad to talk about this week.
And then before we get into this upcoming week, we're going to stay on the subject of NAU just for a little bit. ASU fans were very concerned. Maybe not very concerned, but there was definitely some concern. Sam Levitt.
Some were very concerned, yes.
Very concerned? Okay. Maybe I'm getting a gauge from two different sides of the spectrum, but very concerned were some people. Sam Levitt looked to Jordan Tyson a lot. There was a record number of penalties in the Kenny Dillingham era. It was previously 9, and it went all the way up to 12 on Saturday. So definitely some eyebrows raised there. So we're introducing a segment this week called Calm or Concern, basically just your guys' take on ASU fans, or your opinion to be calm or concerned about the outcome and the performance of ASU in that Saturday game against NAU. So, Jake, I'm going to start with you. Calm or concerned about that Saturday game?
I'm still modestly calm. I mean, when Sam Levitt looks at Jordan Tyson that much, it's understandable because he's a preseason All-American. But going up an opponent like NAU, you would think that Kenny Dillingham would like to spread the ball around a little more, but he said in his Monday presser when they're stacking up man-on-man coverage against Jordan Tyson, you're probably going to look his way a lot just because of the skill set that he possesses and what he can do in the open field. So I wouldn't be too concerned about that. I think the biggest thing is definitely the penalties, just because there was a lot of unforced penalties. Raleek Brown got a 75-yard touchdown called back on a holding call where Malik McClain didn't really need to hold, but it was just those unforced errors over the course of the game that ASU fans may have seen and kind of moaned and groaned a little bit. But I think heading into this week, they'll start to clean that stuff up. Obviously, the offensive line with Ben Coleman, the new center, a couple snaps were a little inaccurate, but overall there weren't too many that altered the game too much. So I would say I'm very calm right now.
Chris, how about yourself?
Yeah, calm. You just can't put too much stock in one game when we've watched however many practices, 50-something practices this year of the team. Fans don't get to see any of that. So they're coming in and their only experience is this one game after they saw a lot of pundits like us predict that ASU was going to have a really great season. We had a season preview podcast. It was like 12-0, 11-1, 11-1, 11-1, 10-2. And then they watch ASU play NAU, a FCS opponent, and then it's not a very good performance. And they're like, well, what the heck? But a lot of the same fans were saying, what the heck, when ASU was in a dogfight against Texas State last year, and that was not the first game of the season. ASU got a lot better. And there's a few things that are factors here. First is that they had a poor game plan for what NAU was going to do, because NAU did things that were different than what it had done last year. And ASU wasn't either really able to know that in advance or wasn't that hyper-focused on trying to prepare for NAU, given the discrepancy between the talent of the two teams. And so that sort of showed up, and that had an impact. Then, as Jake said, really importantly, 12 penalties totally undid a lot of the positive things that happened on the field. You have on 3-play sequence, Raleek Brown 75-yarder on a screen, which broke. That was called back, by the way. I kind of predicted that there was an opportunity for that on X before the game. And then we had seen that in practice. And then the next play was a 64-yard completion that was also called back because of a penalty. And then Sam Levitt was trying to quiet the student section when they were near that end zone, and then they got a delay of game penalty. And so that was like the perfect microcosm of what happened. Imagine that game if those penalties hadn't occurred, just those right there, coupled with maybe NAU not scoring a touchdown in absolute garbage time in the last minute of the game. We would be talking about 46, 45, 48, something points against an NAU that was maybe like a 12-point, 13-point score. And people wouldn't have been nearly as anxious about what they had seen. Doesn't mean that there were no issues at all to be concerned about whatsoever. I'm not saying that. Like, there were some things. Kenny Dillingham sort of dismissed any concerns about snapping and about ASU's offensive line protecting, and they're going to have to see in subsequent weeks whether or not those things are actual issues or they're not issues. There was the over-reliance on Jordan Tyson, I thought, for this game, that given the lower caliber and trying to just get into a rhythm offensively, it would have been probably a good idea to spread the ball around more in the passing game. But I also understand that if one of the best receivers in the country and one of the best ASU receivers of all time is going to get man coverage, Sam Levitt's going to tend to throw the football to him. Levitt did make one really bad decision, interception, that he said was not of his normal tendency, and he regretted that. But he also had another ball earlier in the game where there was a safety over the top into the boundary that was very easy for that player to get to that ball. That was a bad throw. And so we're going to have to see if there's any sort of a tendency here to put the ball into more jeopardy than he did last season, when he was remarkable with his 4-to-1 touchdown to interception rate. All that said, I think that it has to still be calm, because I'm not going to dismiss all of the observations that we saw throughout the entire year in practices based upon one game that looked quite a lot different than what we typically have seen in those practices.
Yeah, I'm on the calm side. I'm on the same page as the two of you as well. So if you're an ASU fan and you take anything we have to say to heart, then hopefully this kind of calmed your mind a little bit, eased your nerves. But yeah, I think a big part of the panic too was just, watching other Big 12 teams kind of beat up on their FCS opponents. But you know what they say, comparison is the thief of joy. Sorry, that was really corny, but I just wanted to throw that.
That was pretty good, actually.
I thought it was kind of a good plug.
I liked it.
Over. But yeah, I think it was just a lot of comparison to how other Big 12 teams, or Big 12 teams especially, that are projected to be contenders for the Big 12 title at the end of the season, were kind of beating up on their FCS opponents that they were playing. And then it's easy to kind of look at how much Sam Levitt was just Jordan Tyson the entire game. and kind of jump to conclusions with that. But we saw this team respond very well last year in the face of adversity, and with the amount of returners and kind of having gone through this before and having to face a little bit of that adversity, I think they will be perfectly okay heading into this week in Starkville, finding a little bit more of that discipline to just bounce back to their identity and the kind of football that fans and that we are familiar with seeing them play. All right, so with that, we're going to do a little bit more of a deep dive now into just different parts of ASU's team and the game and how everything went on Saturday. So offensively, like we said, very Jordan Tyson reliant. He's tied for 6th all-time in a single ASU game with 12 catches. Most of the targets were to him, as we said. Kyson Brown and Raleek Brown both ran the ball pretty effectively. Chris, you and I talked about this in the post-game show after the game. Sam Levitt taking maybe a little bit more hits than he needed to. That could be because of some protection issues with the O-line. But Jake, I'm going to start with you. Just overall kind of offensive thoughts, analysis from that NAU game.
Outside of Levitt's 7 carries, highlighted by a 52-yard touchdown, they really didn't establish the ground game very well between the 3 running backs of Kyson Brown, Raleek Brown, and Kanye Udo. They only had a combined 14 carries, albeit that was almost 9 yards per carry. They didn't really go to the ground game that much and instead decided to look towards Tyson on early downs, and that set them up with a lot of 3rd and mediums and 3rd and longs, and that's how we saw Kenyon Floyd need to punt 4 times compared to if they had set the ground game a little earlier, maybe gotten a couple more 3rd and manageables, we may not have seen them as much.
Chris, your thoughts on the offense as well?
Well, look, I'm curious how much of that was gamesmanship and how much of that was who they intend to be. If you look at the whole body of work that we saw in spring and in preseason camp, they ran the ball with a lot of purpose and focus, and this very clearly is a run play action with RPO type of an offense. Kenny Dillingham said Monday that they wanted to come out and throw the ball around the yard. Okay, but is that what they're going to be throughout the whole season? I don't think so. Yes, I do believe that they want to see Sam Levitt complete a higher percentage of his passes on early downs as part of their recipe, their formula for trying to replace the greatness of Cam Skadaboo and his production. That needs to happen, absolutely. Could they have run the ball very easily with consistency right down every time against NAU? I mean, pretty much. They had 3 and outs in the latter portion of the first half that I think was a little head scratching, and people were kind of like, okay, what are they doing? Well, maybe they were not trying to show certain things. Jaron Hamilton only had 1 snap after we saw him catch a lot of balls behind the defense in camp. Why? Then Jaron Hamilton had a big long catch today in practice that we saw behind the defense, right? So my feeling is that we can't just go off of the one game and determine that that's what we think about this team. I understand that's what fans are going to do because that's all they have to go on. We don't. We have seen a lot more. I think ASU's defense is very good, and ASU's offense has still been productive overall against this defense. I think that would have been logical to spread the ball around to Jordan Tyson more. It would have been logical with Raleek Brown looking as good as he did and as explosive as he did to get him the ball more in some run game, screen game. Kyson Brown was very effective. Both of those guys together, I'm looking at halftime and they're averaging 8-9 yards per carry, but it's like they had 7 carries or something. And I'm like, okay, well, why are they not giving the ball more to these guys? Maybe that's because they didn't want to show that. Remember, Mississippi State is a second game, and last year they handed the ball to Cam Skadaboo however many times to run for the second most yards in ASU history. Maybe they're trying to project that this year with no Cam Skadaboo, it's an older Sam Levitt with Jordan Tyson, it's time to throw the ball around a lot more in early downs. And so maybe they go down to Starkville and we see something that's different. And maybe that's the part of the gamesmanship that Dillingham alluded to today in his media comments. I do think that, as you said, Gabby, that Sam Levitt took too many hits. Part of that, I think, was ASU not, again, being as prepared as it would have liked to have been for some of the twist actions and overload pressures that NAU brought. And then that leads to a quarterback who's not quite sure about where to go with the ball and all of that. Part of that is also on Levitt, because you have designed hot routes that you need to try to get to in the event that you do feel that pressure. But his play extension ability is so good, and his ability to run and make plays with his feet is so dynamic that we saw that he had the 2 long runs, the touchdown, 77 yards or whatever it was, rushing, and that's going to be there. I just think that you want to sort of preserve that for specific RPO calls where there's a design element within it, or on third downs where you kind of have to scramble because teams are maybe playing man coverage or whatever the situation may be. And then I would say Ben Coleman, some of the snaps were a little bit off center, and that could delay the entry into plays. You need things to function really smoothly with that center quarterback snapping operation, so that the quarterback isn't adjusting and then having to have the rhythm of plays get knocked off. And so there were some instances of that, which we knew was a possibility with Ben Coleman, and we're going to have to track that. And then we're also, of course, going to have to see, will Mississippi State and or other teams roll coverage to Jordan Tyson, bracket, double team, figure out a way to try to force the ball to other receivers, and will other receivers, Malik McClain, Jalen Moss, Jaron Hamilton, Derek Asabio, will those guys be able to excel in situations where they need to for this team to be successful? I think we're going to know a lot more about this offense by the time we revisit this on next Monday.
And then, Chris, you did briefly touch on the defense there. This is a defense that really impressed us throughout camp. Brian Ward set some pretty lofty goals and expectations for his defense heading into the season. They had a solid performance. The starters allowed 1 touchdown, a couple of field goals, and ASU's offense put them in some pretty had NAU in some pretty risky starting field positions, and the defense did its best to mitigate that, and they did a solid job with that. So, Jake, just your overall thoughts on the defense this weekend.
Yeah, I mean, Chris and I have been in agreement over the offseason and preseason that this is the best defense that he's covered since 2013, and this is the best defense that I've seen with my own 2 eyes growing up here in Phoenix, Arizona, since that 2013 team that went to the Pac-12 championship. And they did what they needed to do. They allowed 13 points through 3 quarters, and then the backups came in and gave up that late touchdown. The D-line and the linebackers did really well as that front 6, that front 7, only allowing about 20 rushing yards, although it showed 89 rushing yards by the end of the game. Most of that came in the 4th quarter. So when the starters and the people that we'll see for a majority of the games this season were in there, they did exactly what they needed to do. They shut down one of the better offenses in the FCS. And then they really did well with the cat corner blitz, Keith Abney coming in off the edge and sacking the quarterback. That was big for momentum. And just in general, everybody looked pretty clean. The safeties and the corners did pretty well in coverage. Keith Abney and Javen Robinson both bulked up, as most of the defense did over the offseason. And I feel like you could really see that as in their man coverage. They didn't really get beat off the line too much. Keith Abney did really well in his press coverage. So, yeah, I mean, they got the job done.
Chris, how about for you?
Well, mostly a positive performance, given that ASU's offense gave NAU some short fields, and there was also a special teams created short field. I also think that there's a decided effort to probably not show certain things against on film for opponents to prepare for. Like, why are you going to bring a bunch of blitz pressures against NAU when you don't need to do that? When they did bring pressure, it worked, but they just didn't a lot, and they tended to play their base coverage. They're primarily a cover 3 match team. That's what they mostly played. Mississippi State's a very different type of an opponent, so they'll play different coverages and have a different kind of approach. The first and second teams that were out there for the first 3+ quarters, they did not give up anything really on the ground. They played a little bit of that, keep things in front of them in the passing game, to where there were some completions that were between like the curl flat defenders, and NAU was able to move the ball a little bit to 1 touchdown, a couple field goals. As a result of that, I think probably against a team like NAU, I would have liked to have seen a little more man coverage with some more pressures to just not give up anything, really. I don't think that if ASU was playing mostly man coverage, I don't even think NAU would have thrown the ball successfully. When you have Keith Abney and Javen Robinson, Rodney Bimmage, and Xavier Alford, and those guys have done a very good job against a clearly better wide receiver core that ASU has in practices. So yeah, I think it was a reasonably solid overall performance by ASU's defense. People are going to say only generated 1 turnover. Okay, yeah, that's partly coverage and pressure related. Had 3 sacks, not really a great sack performance. Again, they're not really pinning their ears back, selling out. I think we should say that Ramar Williams was really great in a secondary sub-package type of a role. We talked about him throughout camp. He's got a different type of explosiveness off the edge that I think that ASU would be well served to try to feature on third downs to maximize that. I think ASU's linebackers, Keyshawn Elliott and Jordan Crook primarily, but also Cyrus Fiaseu and Martell Hughes, I think that those guys are very good. The D tackles are going to jam up the run. Zach Swanson didn't play as he kind of works his way back from the broken foot that he suffered in April. We'll see about his status against Mississippi State, but he has been in 11-on-11 recently and clearly is trending toward being able to play sooner rather than later. And he's only going to add to what they have up front with CJ Fight, Jacob Kingaika, and some of the other Blazin Lona Wong and others that they have up front. And no big plays behind the defense, no explosives in the run game. I thought that was an overall pretty solid performance by ASU's defense.
Now, really getting into how the special teams performed in that week 1 matchup, like I mentioned earlier, it was a pretty big area of concern. And then Kenny Dillingham did say that they should be drastically improved from last year. But Kenyon Floyd, Big 12 special teams player of the week, they had the punt fake on the 4th down. And then Raleigh Brown almost ran one all the way back, but Turf Monster got him. He got tripped up at about the 50-yard line. Martell Hughes blocked a punt, and then Jesus Gomez went for a 57-yard field goal attempt. Missed that one, but not by a whole lot. They did have multiple guys kicking off, just trying to keep legs fresh, keep everybody fresh. So Jake, just what did you see overall from those special teams? There were kind of there's a lot of different things to look at in this game.
Yeah, I mean, you start with Raleigh Brown is almost a touchdown. That would have been the first special teams touchdown of the year after Martell Hughes blocked a punt last year, blocked another one this year. But I think Raleigh Brown is going to be a really explosive guy on that punt return. Kick return, we didn't see a whole lot just because of how deep NAU's kicker was kicking the ball into the back of the end zone. But I think Raleigh Brown's going to be a really explosive guy when he's catching those punts. They looked like he fielded them pretty clean. I know in preseason camp he muffed a couple, and him and Charlie Regal really worked on that. Charlie Regal spoke to us up at Camp T and just marveled about how talented Raleigh Brown is and compared him to a guy like Darren Sproles. Didn't say he's there yet, but there's a potential that if he continues to work, he could get to that type of level just because of his size and his athleticism. But then when you look at the punting, obviously Kenyon Floyd winning Big 12 special teams player of the week. like Chris said, his drops really improved throughout the game. That first kick wasn't his best, but he bounced back well, and that's something you want to see, making that freshman to sophomore jump. So overall, he seems to be progressing well, and who knows, maybe he'll continue that progression throughout the season. And then Jesus Gomez, like you said, that 57-yard field goal didn't miss by much, and that's honestly a good sign when you have a new long snapper. They brought in Cade Davis in the transfer portal, and he kind of took that starting job over Tyler Wigglesworth throughout preseason camp, started week 1. And so you would like to see that relationship continue to grow between him, Gomez, and Canyon Floyd being the holder. It looked like a pretty solid transition, although it wasn't a perfect hold. It was still a pretty good one. And a lot of the times with the leg strength that Gomez has, that kick is gonna be very gettable, especially when you go to that 50 to 55 yard range, which ASU fans weren't really accustomed to seeing last year, just because of the kickers that they had available didn't really have that range combined with the accuracy that Gomez does.
And then Chris, your thoughts on the special teams as well?
Yeah, we were promised much better special teams. I think that week 1 showed that there's some reason to believe that may be the case. There were still some hiccups that were there. I think the first kickoff was out of the back of the end zone by Jesus Gomez. Second kickoff was a little short. They weren't, I don't think, trying that. And then that contributed to a longer return. Remember, you don't tackle in special teams and practices, so there's a little bit of an adjustment phase to getting used to doing that in games. So that probably contributed. I think the snap that was a little bit off maybe by on that Jesus Gomez 57-yarder. And that maybe contributed to that being a miss. Raleek Brown, he is a very sudden, twitchy athlete. Like, I agree. I think he's going to probably break one, I would say, this year. I wouldn't be surprised to see that at all, maybe more than one. He's one of the more explosive punt returners I think I've probably seen at ASU over the years. And as long as he fields the ball consistently well, which has kind of been the big question around him in practices, he has a tendency to kind of let the ball get a little bit drop down too vertically onto him rather than be moving up to field it and or not letting it bounce in front of him when it shouldn't, and then getting a lot of extra yards. Got to watch that as well. But between an improved Floyd and Gomez having a lot more range and a better upside, and the return game, plus Martell Hughes, and they ran the fake that worked very easily early on in the game, that direct snap. There are signs that this phase of the game could be much improved, and that would be a big deal if that continues to look that way.
Well, hopefully that analysis for all you ASU fans helped ease your mind a little bit of any lingering concerns from that Saturday game. We have a couple more things we are going to touch on as far as last week's game before we get into the Mississippi State look ahead for this upcoming Saturday after a quick word from our presenting sponsor, Jones Auto Centers.
For over 60 years, the Glenn Jones name has been recognized for integrity and honesty.
From the Jones Auto Centers in Wickenburg.
Jones Ford Verde Valley.
Take a nice country drive out the Buckeyes.
When you're talking about Arizona's best, you're talking about the Jones Auto Group. It's quick, fast, strong.
I want to invite you to visit our new facility in Casa Grande and enjoy our country-style way of doing business. We're the Joneses.
All right, welcome back into the Sun Devil Source video podcast presented by Jones Auto Centers. We're in this episode excited to announce a new partnership as well with Sly, drinkonthesly.com. We'll get into a little bit more about our partnership with them and their product, which I just actually tried today for the first time. And spoiler alert, it was pretty good, I have to say. So we have our Sly Move of the Week. This is a segment that we will be doing every week on our Monday podcast. Essentially like a play of the week. We have one on offense and one on defense. And on offense this week, it's going to be that Jordan Tyson over-the-shoulder catch late in the game. He said in the press conference after, that's something I've been working on for a long time, but I haven't really had a chance to show it off. So we'll take a quick look at that one. All right, let's get everyone's thoughts on this. Jordan Tyson just doing Jordan Tyson things. Jake, what did you think of that catch?
Yeah, I mean, you just got to add it to the list of amazing catches that we've seen throughout games and practices. I know a couple of weeks he caught a one-handed catch in practice and then just kept walking like it was nothing. And I think that just speaks on the relationship that Sam Levitt and Jordan Tyson has. Levitt just knows where Tyson's going to be. He knows his stride, where to place it, where only he can grab it. And then the athleticism and the focus of Tyson just really does the rest. He's worked on his hands a lot, and you see that come to fruition in the games.
Chris, what'd you see there?
Saw a really great wide receiver, one of the best wide receivers that I've seen ever at ASU. I think that this 2-season time that he's going to spend at ASU, as long as he stays healthy, is going to rank right up there with some of the best all times, maybe like a Derek Hagan, who is the all-time leader in multiple categories at ASU. Very few guys have the ability to put that type of body control on display. He makes these things happen that almost nobody can do look routine, which is a great sign of somebody who's got a special type of a talent. Most guys could never even dream of adjusting to that ball, to drift to that place, to have it come down in their hands, much less get their feet in bounds. And Jordan Tyson's able to do that. It's kind of crazy because we saw him have like 3 drops today in practice, and he has had somewhat of a tendency to have drops in practices, but then you go into games and it's just like when the lights are on, he just shows up in the, bright stage. He's ready. He looks like a first-round draft pick. I mean, you know that the relationship between Sam Levitt and Jordan Tyson is so strong. And also Marcus Arroyo, ASU's offensive coordinator, who was the de facto Burroughs Award Offensive Coach of the Year last year because he was the only finalist who was an offensive coach, did a phenomenal job of being able to move Tyson around the formation. People saw him at X and Z on the other side, and in F, which is the slot role. Tyson said he grew up playing F because he was this undersized guy, and then he became somebody who can play more on the outside, so he's still very comfortable and familiar. No matter whatever type of schemes that opponents have had, Arroyo's been able to generate those one-on-one matchups that have led to him being a high-volume target guy. We saw a similar catch at Kansas State last year that was huge in the back of the end zone where he had the 1 foot in bounds, just snatching hands, just going up and easily securing the ball. It's a rare thing that ASU fans better enjoy while they can, because this might be the last season. I've seen him projected anywhere as high as the top 10 of next year's NFL draft. Remember, he just turned 21, so he's got a lot of accomplishment already kind of in the bag for somebody that young. And earlier this year, he was baptized in February. He's sort of really dedicated himself to a sense of purpose and his relationship with God. And that also, I think, has shown up in his maturity, the way that he interacts with media, and the type of leader that he's trying to become. And so all these things are on display in a big way. And it's hard to imagine, as long as those guys stay healthy, that this isn't one of the most impressive seasons by a wide receiver in ASU history. I know everybody's knocking on wood out there if you're an ASU fan about that, but it looks like it's setting up that way.
Yeah, it's definitely been cool to see his upwards trajectory. He was the very first ASU player I talked about my freshman year covering spring football. He had just gotten to Tempe as well, and he was the first player I talked to. I had no idea what I was doing as journalistically. I don't know how I ended up over there talking to him, but I mean, I just remember that moment. And so kind of seeing him progress, Chris, like you said, and just grow as a leader and as a player. It's been really cool to see, and it is something that ASU fans should feel kind of lucky that they get to witness for at least one more season. But on the flip side of the ball, we also have our slide defensive move of the week. This week, it's going to seventh-year lineman Anthony Cooper. He came up big with a pick towards the end of the game. He's a seventh-year player, the only homegrown seventh-year player in ASU history. So knowing the context and kind of the backstory of all of that, it was really cool for fans to see. So we'll check that one out as well. Now, Jake, not much else for me to say on that. Just a really cool, awesome moment to see in person. What were your thoughts on it?
Yeah, I mean, talk about a full circle moment there. The only person in program history to be with ASU for all 7 years came in 2019. Was a part of one of the few players that's still left over from the Herm Edwards era. Has really gone through the ups and downs with this team. Talked to the media up at Camp T for the first time that he's been here, as he's more of a shy guy, but I mean, just a really athletic play. Like, he's 260 pounds coming off a torn ACL last year, and he dives out, is able to get his fingertips underneath the ball. Just a really cool moment. And it's just really rewarding to see a guy get something like that after, like I said, he tore his ACL last year, said he wanted to come back on his own terms, finish out his ASU career on the field instead of on the sideline on some crutches. And so it's just really rewarding. And Brian Ward's had some lofty goals of 40 sacks and 30 takeaways. And although 3 sacks and 1 interception, or 1 turnover, I should say, per week isn't going to get the job done, it's certainly a step in the right direction. And that's just a big morale booster for the entire team. You saw everyone crowd around him. The entire sideline erupted after they reviewed it and confirmed the call. Everyone went over to circle around him and give him some pats on the helmet. So just a really, really great moment for not only him, but just everybody that's known who he is, what he's gone through to get up to this point.
Chris, what did you see on that?
Well, first, Albert Smith got the pressure. I mentioned him earlier. Also saw that both of those clips were shot by Sun Devil Source. Gabby, I know you shot the Jordan Tyson one. Did you also shoot the Anthony Cooper one, or was that
Jacob had the better angle on the Cooper one, so that's his clip. Thank you, Jacob, for providing your clip to our podcast.
Well, a lot of ASU fans missed a lot of the game because of the ESPN Plus streaming issues. So we got all those clips on Sun Devil Source, so you may want to check that out on our YouTube page. But Anthony Cooper lost about 10-15 pounds, and I think he's going to be mostly a sub-package player this year because he doesn't have quite as much heft to be able to hang in there as a defensive tackle on base downs, probably. And ASU is very deep at the defensive end positions, where he's also played at stages of his career. But the main thing is just his decision to return for another season, a 7th year of college. A lot of guys wouldn't do that. They'd move on. They would consider their football careers done after a serious knee injury, but he didn't want to go out that way. And that also is illustrative of him sticking through kind of the worst 2-year period of ASU football since World War II, with the back-to-back 3-9 seasons, wanting to see it out. Like, there's something to be said about somebody who's got that job's not finished mentality and what that provides from a cultural standpoint to your team. And he's a mature guy who really carries himself well and is a good example for, I think, a lot of the people on the team to work through some adversity and how you persevere and handle a lot of those things. And so for him to be able to make a diving play like that in his first game back in his 7th season, as you said, Gabby, the only homegrown 7th-year player coming out of Millennium High School in Goodyear, that's kind of the stuff that dreams are made of, to be able to write your own story and have it be on your terms.
Absolutely. And now we have our two Sly moves of the week presented. Chris, I want to ask you a little bit more about this partnership with Sly. Like I said, I was able to try one of their beverages for the first time this morning, and I feel great afterwards. So, Chris, if you want to give us just a little bit more insight as to our partnership and their product.
Yeah, well, Tom Chiz is a longtime ASU fan and supporter, and this is his beverage company, drinkonthesly.com. It's a feel-good drink because it has no caffeine, very little sugar, low calories, no carbs. So it's like an alternate vibes-based beverage to what a lot of people are consuming that you don't have any sort of worries about consuming. And there's 3 different vibes that you can go with depending upon your mood. One is a boost, so it's natural ingredients that are designed to help your alertness and focus and your acuity. And then there's a chill, which is just kind of you're relaxing and you're hanging out and you want to eliminate any sort of anxiousness or whatever it is that you might be feeling. And then there's a dream, which has a melatonin component, which people know is a sleep aid that works for a lot of people. And I've had them all. They come in different flavors and they're pretty good. And I'm one of these people, especially during the football season, where it's like you get into like a cycle where you got caffeine that you're consuming, and then maybe you have some beers or tequila or something to wind down. We work a lot of like nights that are late, and so you're kind of in that cycle, and you're maybe not getting enough sleep. And a lot of young people are drinking like really like heavy caffeinated or sugary beverages, and this is just something that Tom has created that's picking up some steam, and he's got some NIL relationships with some players that are on some of the teams at ASU, football and hockey and maybe others. And it's available at a lot of Tempe locations. And I think it's a natural partnership for us because it's something that we can easily stand behind and be proud of and that we enjoy.
Yeah, Tom was nice enough to give me a few of the flavors to try. I got to try the tropical boost one is the one I had today. Kind of had a late night last night and then an early morning today. So after lunch, I was just like, I need something. And I remembered, I said, I have my Sly in the fridge. And I drank it on my way from Tempe to downtown. And I feel great. I feel rejuvenated now. And it doesn't give you that kind of like shaky feeling that I feel like I sometimes get, at least when I drink a lot of caffeine, which is normally what I turn to. But I kind of have that same alertness and sense of being awake with the Sly boost. And then I don't have any of that shakiness either. And like you said, low calorie, low sugar. So there's not any guilt in drinking. I don't feel like I just drank a milkshake just to get some caffeine in my body. So in my first time trying it, I would definitely recommend it as a good product as well. It tastes great also, which is important. But once again, thank you to Tom and thank you to Sly for their partnership. We will be back with our Mississippi State first look after a quick word from them. All right, one more big thank you to Sly as we welcome you back to the Sun Devil Source podcast presented by Jones Auto Centers. Now we're looking ahead. It's Mississippi State week. Jake, like I mentioned at the top of the podcast, you have been the one doing all the extensive research on the Bulldogs. Sun Devils heading down to SEC country this week. So what can you say just about the matchup as a whole? Give us a little bit of a preview.
Yeah, Gabby. I mean, it's year 2 of the home and home series. ASU hosted Mississippi State last year, won their first ever SEC or first ever win over an SEC program, and then the Bulldogs went on to finish their year going 2-10. So a very forgettable year for Jeff Lebby in his first year. Now back for his second year, but biggest thing is going to be the cowbells. We heard all of them at practice today. ASU handed out to all the staffers at practice cowbells. They had them blaring on the speakers, and once we headed inside to the Dickey Dome for the final period of practice, you could really get a sense of how loud it's going to be in Starkville at the Wade Davis Stadium. But just looking at this team, last year they had 53 newcomers. This year they have 43, but 16 of their 22 starters are back, and that wasn't something that Jeff Lebby had last year. He brought in Blake Shapen, now a graduate, was a senior last year, came in from Baylor, only played 4 games, ASU being one of those. He sat out the final 8 games due to an injury, but now that he's back, he looked really good in Mississippi State's season opener against Southern Miss. He had an interception, but outside of that, he looked very strong, was going through his reads pretty well, and that was a good thing for Mississippi State fans because they lost their big receiver Kevin Coleman. He led the Bulldogs with 932 receiving yards last year. Had that 80-yard touchdown against ASU to make that final score 30-23 and give ASU fans a bit of a scare in the back half of the game. But when you look at this offense, they run a lot of trips and formations towards the boundary with their receivers. And they also like to throw in their tight end over with the receivers in that trip formation. They're very RPO heavy, and if you're sleeping on defense, they will catch you. They'll throw a little slant over the top that'll break big. They have some big guys up front on the offensive line in the run game, but they're returning their leading rusher, Davin Booth. He led them with 732 rushing yards on the ground last year, and the duo of him and the sophomore transfer from South Alabama, Fluff Bothwell, combined for 124 yards and 3 touchdowns. Bothwell had 2 of those as he's kind of separated himself, although it's just the first game. He had 2 of those rushing touchdowns, both coming in goal-to-go situations. Now they had 188 total rushing yards as Blake Shapen was able to get outside the pocket and scramble for a little bit of those yards, but a main reason for that being is because they have 3 new offensive linemen on their front 5. The center, the right guard, and the right tackle are all brand new. That left side is solidified, but that right side is where Southern Miss was able to get a little bit of pressure on Shapen, and that ended up with him being sacked twice. Now, when you look over at the defense, they ran a 3-3-5 last year, but Cam Scadaboo blew right through that, ended up with 262 rushing yards, second most in program history for a single game, like Chris mentioned earlier. And that was because they only had those 3 guys up front, so ASU's tackles were able to set the edge very well. Now, against Southern Miss, they still kept that base down, but a couple times they moved a linebacker down for more of a 4-2-5 look, and that held up pretty well. They only allowed 55 rushing yards against Southern Miss, and they also returned their leading tackler, Isaac Smith, this year. He had 127 last year, and he had 17 of those against ASU, as he was the guy meeting Cam Scadaboo on a lot of those rushing attempts. Like I mentioned before, they're very strong against the run, and we didn't see a whole lot from ASU on the rushing game against NAU. So there may be some potential for them to break a couple more runs. Like Chris said, they maybe didn't want to pin back their ears too much and show and give a lot of film for Mississippi State when they go over to Starkville. I think the biggest thing for both of these teams is who can play the cleaner game. ASU had 12 penalties, and the Bulldogs had 14 for 119 yards. Both of these teams were very similar because they had big touchdown plays of 50, 60 yards called back because of penalties, and Mississippi State had 2 of those. So I think whoever can play the cleaner game, can clean up their offensive line a little more, I think is going to be the team that will be in a much better situation to come out with a win.
Chris, I know you tweeted out before ASU's game that you had recorded the Mississippi State game to watch later. So in your scouting report, what did you see?
Yeah, still going through it. The main thing I would say is that the Mississippi State offense is extremely predictable based upon what ASU already saw last year. It's going to be a lot of the same schemes. Yeah, there's no Kevin Coleman. He was our top playmaker, but Blake Shapen's back. They run a lot of the same concepts. That's not going to be something that catches ASU's defense off guard or its preparations. That should be locked in. Off the other side of the ball, ASU's going to have a plan for both that odd front look that predominated last year's defense, in Tempe when they played, when Cam Scadaboo went off and there was no ability for the Bulldogs to stop the run game. With that 4-2-5, which seems like something that they may do a little bit more often, but that's kind of an unknown factor. Those are two very different types of approaches, even if it's the same kind of personnel where you just bring a guy down and play him with his hand in the ground. So they're going to have to be prepared for both of those. And then also there's a lot of new personnel. What do they have, like 60 new players, some astounding number that they brought in after their really disappointing season last year. We'll get into a lot more of the matchups, the personnel, what ASU will probably do schematically in our Thursday podcast after I've had another day and a half or so to really kind of break down tendencies and what we'll probably see. I did notice that running back transfer, Fluff Blockwell, is a physical 230-pound, 5'10", 5'11", contact balance guy who's going to make defenses really rally and be forceful in what they're doing at the point of attack. I agree. Like to set up our preview podcast, I think that ultimately the cleaner operation is the team that's going to have a much higher chance of winning. ASU not only was first in the Big 12 in run defense last year, but also turnover margin. And it didn't tend to have catastrophic penalties. It wasn't a low penalty team. But those categories are going to be super important. Got to avoid the turnovers, stop the run, not give up big plays. That's kind of a recipe for ASU being successful on the road, trying to get its first SEC win. On the road.
Real quick, just before we go, Chris, like you said, on Thursday, Jacob will host that podcast. Definitely much more of a deep dive into what can be expected out of this ASU and Mississippi State matchup. You and I will both be in Starkville on Saturday, so definitely looking forward to that. We're headed to Memphis. We're flying into Memphis and then driving down to Starkville, so that'll be an interesting two places I've never been before. I don't know about you if you've ever been to either one of those places, but
I've never been to Memphis, and I've been to Mississippi, but only on the Gulf Coast area. So I've never been to the area where we're going to be, or Starkville. Looking forward to it.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it as well. Before we say goodbye, though, there are a couple more sponsors that we do want to thank. We want to thank El Bandito, Yankee Tequila, and Devil's Liquor over in Tempe, as well as Devil's Vodka. So, Chris, if you want to give us, again, another kind of spiel on just our partnership with them and our relationship with them, too. I'm not 21, so I cannot speak to these two products as I can with Sly, but I think I'll leave that one to you.
Yeah, we'll talk about that maybe after the podcast, Gabby. But
okay.
Look, these are all owned by friends. Like all of these people who are our partners between Sly and Rack Scottsdale, El Bandito, Yankee Tequila, Devil's Liquor, Devil's Vodka. They're all friends, and there are people that are Tempe based. Matter of fact, Devil's Vodka. The proprietor used to own the Dash Inn. A lot of people who are my age and older will remember that was like a go-to spot on Apache back in the day. A big Greek bar with a lot of parties and events. And bottom line is people are going to have some mixed drinks when they're watching football. Whether if that's not like a beer, may want to throw together a Devil's Vodka and a Sly. You mentioned the Sly Tropical, Gabby. It actually goes quite well with Devil's Vodka. If you're just going to drink something like a well type of a vodka, might as well go with Devil's Vodka, right? And El Bandito. I'm a tequila person. They have a reposado that's quite nice. Devil's Liquor is right there on Apache near McClintock. Super convenient. Has all the brands that are sponsoring the podcast. So if you want to support the people who support us and help us bring this podcast and our coverage to you, that would be the right move. Is you go and you get some El Bandito and you get some Devil's Vodka, you get some Sly. They have Sly there at Devil's Liquors, and you got a nice party going right there.
A party indeed. And if you're an ASU student watching this podcast, that is your next pregame drink idea. Pick a
If you're
slide.
21, if you're 21.
If you're 21, okay, ASU is a dry campus also. Okay, pick a Sly flavor, get some El Bandito, Yankee Tequila, grab some Devil's Vodka, make yourself your own little pregame drink. We do seriously want to thank all of those sponsors once again. Of course, a big thank you to Jones Auto Centers, our presenting sponsor, to Sly, and to El Bandito, Yankee Tequila, as well as Devil's Liquor and Devil's Vodka. This wouldn't be possible without you. And we're all very excited to start our live podcast next week from Rack Scottsdale. So a big thank you to them for hosting us so we can host this podcast live for all of you as well. The test run we did, like I said, looked amazing. It's really exciting. And Chris, I think we're both excited to just kind of see how that turns out. We have so many fun things in store for that podcast, and we will see you there next Monday. So until then, Gabby Chernoff, Chris Cartman, and Jake Sloan for Sun Devil Source. Thank you so much for watching.